A shocking murder aboard a luxury super yacht. The victim in this story is this 20-year-old crew member of the multi-million-dollar yacht that was anchored off the coast of a picturesque beach in the Bahamas. Police say she was stabbed to death in the ship's engine room. What we know about the suspect now in custody. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Before we get started with this episode of On the Case, I have an exciting announcement for all of you who love to watch police body camera videos. We know you love the action, but this is even better. Highlights from On Patrol Live are on YouTube. The show is live on the Reels channel and Reels Plus app every Friday and Saturday, and follows police officers across the country with over 50 cameras rolling live. And let me tell you, it is wild. We're talking high-speed chases, intense standoffs, and everything in between. So head over to On Patrol Live's YouTube channel to catch it all, and make sure to subscribe. That channel launches today, Monday, July 14th, and you can subscribe by clicking the link in the description. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. All right, let's get to this story that we're following in a place that so rarely you see cases like this. Many of us will work our entire lives and will not have the money to be able to own a yacht like where this murder happened in the Bahamas. Frankly, a lot of us will not have the money to be able to afford to rent a yacht like the one that we're talking about today. But hopefully we will leave an impact on people the way that Paige Bell apparently did. Many people have been sharing their fond memories of Paige since the news of this story broke. And here's what we know. She was found stabbed to death recently inside the engine room of the yacht that she worked on. She was a member of the crew for a super yacht. And when you have that job, not only is it a lot of hard work, but you get to see the world. These are boats that very wealthy people can book online, and they use them to cruise the most exclusive waters of the world. And not only do you get to rent the boat, the crew comes with it, and you get people like Paige Bell working on your boat, making sure you have the vacation of a lifetime. She often posted pictures of life away from the work that she did, helping guests who paid big money to charter the boat that she worked on. Here's where that boat was anchored. And when I talk about the exclusive waters of the world, we are talking about Harbour Island, Bahamas. This is a playground of the rich and famous. It's been rumored to be a place that billionaires have properties on, dozens of billionaires. Prince Harry visited in 2012 when he still had duties as a member of the royal family. This is the place that that class of people go to when they visit the Bahamas. People work their entire lives to be able to go to a place like Harbour Island, and to be on a yacht like this one. And for people in the maritime business, this yacht, where this murder took place, it can sleep 10 guests. It has 5 staterooms, even a marble-topped wet bar. Here's a picture of it that we found on Instagram. Its website says, quote, "It is well equipped to provide charter vacations of a lifetime. The cost of a lifetime of memories on board this yacht will cost you. A week-long charter runs as much as $165,000. But on July 3rd at 1 p.m., so we are talking the middle of the day, police say they responded to a report of a stabbing on the yacht, and they found Paige Bell. She was set to turn 21 on July 14th. Get back to this episode of On the Case. I want to pause and take a moment and bring you a Law&Crime legal alert. If you received a Depo-Provera birth control shot and were later diagnosed with a brain or a spinal tumor called meningioma, you may be eligible for a lawsuit. Our partners at Morgan & Morgan are investigating claims that patients weren't properly warned about this risk. It's free to check, takes just a few minutes, and you don't pay unless they win. So you can scan the QR code on your screen, click the link below for more information. Also head over to www.forthepeople.com/LCDEPO to see if you qualify. Police did not have to look far to find their suspect, they say. He was laying right next to Paige on the ground, and it was a fellow member of the crew of this super yacht. He has been identified by authorities as a 39-year-old Mexican national, an engineer on board this 10 crew member yacht. I'll talk a little bit more about what we know about him in just a moment. According to the Daily Mail, the suspect had cuts on his arm, making it appear that he may have tried to take his own life after allegedly stabbing and killing Paige Bell. He was taken to a hospital before being arrested, and he has now been charged with the murder of Paige Bell. The Daily Mail appears to have been in the courtroom in the Bahamas for this suspect's first appearance. They have identified him as Brigido Munoz. Here's his picture on Facebook. According to police, Munoz made his court appearance, but was not forced at that court appearance to enter a plea. Now, we're still working to learn more about Bahamian law and how all of this could play out. We do know his next court appearance, according to local media, will be in November of this year. So he is expected to be in custody for several months ahead of his next appearance. He is now being held without bond. Now, it's unclear, according to police, what his alleged motive was for the murder of Paige Bell. It's also unclear whether he had a criminal background. Since Bell's murder, a petition on change.org has more than 4,500 signatures calling for background checks to be mandatory to work on a yacht outside the United States. The petition says that many companies and owners of super yachts do require background checks, but not all of them. Before I go, I do want to note all the support that Paige and her family is receiving. She was a native of South Africa, and according to a GoFundMe, her family's asking for friends to honor her by eating red velvet cake, which they say was her favorite. The crew members she worked with on a previous yacht launched this GoFundMe, and you can see at the time of this recording, it has raised more than $55,000 to help with the funeral arrangements for this 20-year-old girl. Join us now to talk about this case is Michael Winkleman, maritime attorney. Great person to have on to talk about the circumstances surrounding what happened to Paige Bell, the stewardess on board a super yacht. When it comes to a crime like this being committed on board one of these yachts, it's in a foreign country, but it's anchored offshore. How could the law factor into how this case plays out, maybe compared to if this happened in the United States in an apartment building, but, on a super yacht, a very different circumstance?
So as a maritime attorney, every incident I deal with, whether it's a death or just a personal injury type of a case, someone slips and falls, jurisdiction is always complicated. You've got the law, the flag of the vessel. You've got, if you're a U.S. citizen, then you've got the FBI that's involved. You've got the place of the incident. This actually happens to be probably among an easier analysis because it happened in just off the coast of Eleuthera, which is the Bahamas. The Royal Bahamas Police Force was immediately involved. So it seems pretty cut and dry that it will be the Bahamian authorities that are ultimately the ones that will move forward with the case, prosecute the case, and chances are, from what I've seen, this person should be in jail in a Bahamian prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and he's not expected to be in court until November, which feels like a really, several months he'll be held without bail. I know in cases that you'll work on, I'm sure you have to, especially in the Caribbean, where one law can be, or one country can be very different from another, and yet they're very close. Typically, how do the Bahamians handle these types of situations?
So I've had a lot of experience dealing with cases in the Bahamas, people that get injured in resorts, people that get injured on yachts, things of that nature. Generally speaking, I always say the wheels of justice turn slowly, period. But I think they turn even slower in a place like the Bahamas. I've had cases involving rapes and sexual assaults at hotels in the Caribbean, and cases have lingered on for years. And that can really just be like pulling teeth for the family. So, if this happened in the U.S., if there was the federal authorities that were involved, I think the pace would be much quicker. I would expect this to take some time. I think you already see that without what sounds like a first bail hearing, not even until November. So yeah, the wheels of justice certainly do turn slowly.
And in this yacht, where it's a crime scene where this took place, and even though from the outside it appears that we know who did it, at least according to what law enforcement's laid out, we don't know a motive, but this is a yacht where it goes from port to port, and it could be, you have a charter scheduled for next week, maybe in, Jamaica or another country. What happens to the ship as the wheels of justice turn slowly in the Bahamas related to this?
Well, I would be surprised if they would just seize the vessel and keep it indefinitely. That would be a very significant move. The authorities were likely able to do the investigation that they need. Of course, they came on the scene. From the reports that I've read, of course, I wasn't there. I'm not involved with the investigation. They found him next to the body. He had wounds all over himself. They think either perhaps he tried to kill himself, or they could have just been defensive wounds. But, I don't want to say it's an open and shut case. The only question that seems to be out there right now is why. Like you said, Chris, what's the motive? But I don't see this as a case where they would need to keep that vessel indefinitely, which would be a huge blow to the owners of that vessel because, of course, they make significant money off of chartering it. So my guess is they probably let it go. They probably did what they needed to do, and now the vessel will continue sailing. But of course, the entire crew in there and the owners, and that will have a black flag on it for the rest of its existence. Of course, that all pales in comparison to what's going on with the family who lost this beautiful young woman.
Yeah, and I just think of, I mean, if you're a member of that crew, and I don't know when their next charter was booked to be, but to have to get back into that line of work of hospitality while dealing with that loss, and both people who were involved in this case, the victim and the suspect, were members of this crew. I think people, in some ways, if you watch the show Below Deck, you might understand the super yacht, to an extent. We've seen kind of the relationships, but just in your work, what is life like? As Paige Bell, she was a stewardess on board. This suspect was reportedly an engineer on board. I mean, what's the dynamic of living on one of these 142-foot yachts?
Well, I'm not a big reality television fan. My wife loves it. I'm familiar with the show. I've interacted with some of the people that have been on it over the years. But yeah, crew life is tough. It's a very unique life. I think there's an aspect of it that's very fun, festive. There's a lot of partying that's going on. But another part of it is very hard. They work long hours. They're far away from home. And, on yachts, it's a little bit different. I do a ton of stuff regarding cruise ships, whether it's passengers or crew members that get hurt. That's an entire whole universe. There's tons of issues that go on, excessive drinking, crimes, assaults, rapes, etc. It's certainly a much smaller microcosm on a yacht, but definitely you hear tons of stories about drugs and alcohol and really sordid stuff that happens. You hear a lot about rapes and sexual assaults. I don't want to say it's a dangerous line of work as a whole, but I do think that there are some certain risks that are more present when you're working on a yacht in these kind of conditions versus, let's say, if she was a stewardess on an airplane. Just it's part of the nature of the business. What I think is interesting here is what was going on with the person, the suspect. What was going on in his mind? Why was he doing it? How long was he at sea? What's his story? I mean, it's hard to not think that there was at least some type of sexual motivation related to it. It sounds like there was a sexual assault that was about to occur. My guess is that's what his intent was. But yeah, I think overall as a whole, Chris, it's a very unique environment working at sea, and one which does present some dangers.
Well, right. And I think too, I mean, for as much as, as far as boats that people have been on, 142 feet sounds very large, but if that's where you're living with 10 people, which is how large the crew was in this case, like it's really not that big if you think about it just in terms of living space. I think of, this suspect, we don't know a lot about him other than he's from Mexico originally, he's 39 years old, but I have seen there was a change.org petition with thousands of signatures calling for background checks to be, and I don't know if he had a criminal record before, but background checks to be required for these ships at sea, where I guess you would know better than I that in the United States, if you're, I guess it's required here, but not in Caribbean islands. Typically, what is the status of background checks and understanding whether your fellow crew members might be someone who's dangerous?
That's a great question, Chris. There's really no bright line rule that says background checks must be undertaken. I know in the cruise ship industry, they have become more common. But again, there you're dealing with literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that are working industry wide. So you have a real clear need for it. And I know in my line of work, if a cruise line didn't do a background check on someone or a yacht owner didn't do a background check on someone, I would make the argument that they should have done that. Had they done that, they would have become aware of some type of a dangerous propensity. It's really a critical question here as it relates to this case, because to the extent there was any type of civil litigation that ensued, not criminal, civil, let's say the family wanted to sue the yacht owner, et cetera, the number one thing that you would be looking into was the background of Munoz and what was going on with him, whether or not they did a background check, what it revealed, had they done it, what it would have revealed. But if the assailant had any type of a dangerous propensity or had any kind of a background, there is certainly liability on the owner of the vessel in terms of what happened here.
She's from South Africa originally. He is a Mexican national. I'm not sure where the ship was flagged out of, but this clearly took place in the Bahamas. Any sort of civil court case that would play out, where would that happen?
Well, the first place I would look, being a maritime attorney, would be the crew member's contract of representation, their employment contract. Basically, that says in those type of cases, any crew member who works on any ship nowadays, it says, hey, if you're going to sue us, if you get hurt, you're going to sue in this jurisdiction. So that would be where I would start. It could be in the Bahamas. It could be the flag of the vessel. It could be any location. But strictly speaking, if there was some type of civil litigation, theoretically, if the vessel ever came to the United States, you could arrest the vessel as collateral against the case. So interesting issue. If it plays out civilly, I do think there are significant avenues that could be in play from a civil perspective. But at this point, I think we're still asking more questions than answers.
When you look at this story, and just from reading the change.org petition, and then people who work in the maritime industry or work on one of these super yachts, it seems like there's a lot of call for certain changes when it comes to safety, and the background check argument is certainly part of it. In your work, what are some of the other issues that are at play? Because we do see, whether it is watching the reality TV show or maybe you're on vacation and you look at a yacht and you're like, man, what would it be like to own one of those or be on one of those? Like, what a cool life that would be. But I'm sure you see a lot of the challenges that also play out in this industry. What are some of the things that people should know about?
Well, I really think you touched on an important topic, Chris, which is the need for background checks. There is no uniform legislation that talks about it. I do think it's something that should be considered, at least from an American perspective, if not an industry-wide perspective, because I think that's what it takes to really make sure that crew members are safe in there. And you have a lot of interest in women just like Paige, who are young, they wanted to have some adventure, and there really should be more safeguards that are in place that are there to protect them. Because you have these situations where the crew members are living and working on the boat for weeks, if not months on end. And that in and of itself presents some significant dangers, some unique dangers. So I do think there needs to be more done. In terms of industry whole, what can be done to protect crew members? That's a gigantic rabbit hole, which I'd be happy to go down, but that would probably be better for another segment, Chris.
Yeah, no, and I bet that there's a lot to talk about. This is certainly a very, very, it's a sad case. I mean, a young girl, she was going to be 21 years old today, actually. And to see this all, left South Africa to work on a yacht and for this to happen, it's just terrible. The suspect will be in court again in November. Michael Winkleman, a maritime attorney. Great insight on this. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Appreciate it.
Joining us now to help break down this case and where it could go from here, criminal defense attorney Mauricio Padilla. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Good to see you again, though a very, very sad case that we're following here. What do you make of the fact that this happened on, one of these luxury super yachts that typically, at least from the outside, it seems like, if you're involved with a yacht like this, like you have everything and everything's going, it's the perfect place to go, but clearly something was going on.
Yeah, listen, apparently someone must have really dropped the ball when it comes to, checking the backgrounds. I mean, I would be shocked if this individual doesn't have anything in his history that would have indicated that he was capable of something like this. In my experience, when people commit these types of horrific crimes, there's usually a past, either, certain criminal issues that may have arisen in the past. So my first indication would be whether or not the super yacht or the people that are in charge of the management, whether they did their due diligence in finding out really who this guy was and whether or not he was safe to have on the boat, would be my first.
Yeah, we know he's 39. He's from Mexico originally. He was the engineer on board the boat. So you assume that he has some sort of history, a technical skill that's why he would be hired, but it wasn't required for background checks. It's unclear whether there was a background check. That's still part that we're trying to figure out here. I think of the environment that someone lives in when they work on a super yacht. I mean, clearly from the outside, 142-foot boat, it feels like a big boat, but for that to be the place where you live, how closely you work with your coworkers, which both of them were members of this crew. In these types of cases that you've seen, how does the dynamic, to have people who are working so closely to each other, both physically, but then also personally, long hours, can factor into these types of scenarios?
Listen, that's one of the reasons why I believe that if you're involved in the business of chartering these super yachts, that you really have to go above and beyond to figure out who it is that you have on your crew, because you're right. Not only are they living in close proximity, alcohol is involved. In my experience, when people charter these boats, the guests sometimes drink with people that are involved. So, and I watch reality TV shows that are based on super yachts and things of that nature, and you see that they drink. And you're right. Anytime that you have people in close proximity, you got to really figure out who you have on this boat and whether or not they're going to get along, whether they're a threat to one another. You know, I saw her picture. She was a very beautiful young woman. So anytime that you have someone that's attractive, there could be issues of people falling in love with her, you know, and I don't know what the history between the two were, but it's something that I think rises to the level that the people that are involved in this type of business should go above and beyond to figure out really who you have on this boat.
Because I imagine too for her family, and they're just coming to grips with what happened, and you really feel for them. But at the same time, when I think of like what a civil case could look like, I mean, who could be held, you know, assuming that this suspect will go to prison for the rest of his life in the Bahamas, I mean, who could be held liable for the fact that this happened on this boat?
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, I would envision that a lawsuit would be forthcoming, and I would envision that it would be like a negligent hiring situation. Like, you know, someone would possibly the allegation would be is you guys failed to do your due diligence, and then that would really require something in the guy's history. So pretty much, I would believe that right now there's got to be investigators investigating who this guy is historically, finding out what was in his background, because if this is just an isolated incident, then that they're going to use that to absolve themselves of any liability. Like saying, listen, it's not our fault. We thought the guy was a normal person, and all of a sudden he went crazy, you know. And then there's also like in my experience when it comes to, you know, insurance policies, there's also like situations where insurance policies don't want to pay because they're saying that they're not responsible for the tortious and criminal activity of someone else. So you really have to show that there was something there that they failed to look at. There's something there that could have indicated or could have prevented this from happening for you to move forward with a successful cause of action.
And this suspect has yet to enter a plea, but he's had his first bail hearing, bond hearing in a Bahamian courtroom, and he'll be in custody being held without bond until November. I think of whoever's going to defend him. I mean, this happened in the engine room of the ship. He was found right next to the victim. He has wounds on his arm that reportedly it's believed that potentially he tried to take his own life. If you were to defend this suspect, I mean, how do you go about it considering he was found right next to the person who was the victim?
Yeah. Okay. First, you got to figure out also statements that he may have made. In my experience, I would be shocked if he didn't make a statement, you know, like to the police admitting guilt. If that's the case and there's already a confession, then you really got to figure out whether or not there's a mental health angle, whether there's, if you want to use insanity as a defense, whether that's plausible, whether there's a history of mental illness that you could rely on. But yeah, listen, some cases, it's already sounding like it's not going to be that defendable a case if he was found right next to her. And then listen, nowadays also, you know, when it comes to, even if you're on a super yacht, there's a ton of, you know, cell phone evidence, forensics, back and forth. There's also video footage that could work against them. So I think, you know, the first thing you really want to look at is the mental health angle, because if he's the only subject and what you're saying is true, that it's already looking like he's pretty much the subject, you really want to go that route. And then really what you want to do is try and get your mental health experts lined up early so that they can already start going out there and doing interviews with them, because you know that you want contemporaneous evaluations so that someone could opine as to how he's doing at the moment. That's in my experience. That's the way I handle these cases. I don't want to bring somebody on 6 months from now to do an evaluation when, you know, you could try and get them in as early as possible to start opining about you know, his mental health.
And I'm not an expert on Bahamian law and how it works out, but if this were to happen in the United States, I mean, we often talk about how everybody deserves to have a defense, and then you see how it all plays out in court. But if you have a case, let's just say, like for you as the attorney, it's an undefendable case. Like he's guilty of this. I'm not saying he is, but let's just say you kind of look at the case and whether you're going to take it on, and it's pretty clear that he did it, and then the mental health argument doesn't work out either. I mean, what is the outcome that you look for in that type of case when you're defending a client that, let's face it, he did it? The mental health thing's not going to work. And again, I know that Bahamian law is probably a little bit different than US law, but ultimately, generally speaking, when you're in those situations, like what is the goal of a criminal defense attorney?
Well, okay. First of all, if he's charged with first degree, just because you wake up and there's a body there doesn't mean that it was premeditated. It could have been anything from, it could have been like a manslaughter situation. There could have been a self-defense component to it. So you really gotta, just because there's someone, passed away doesn't mean that first degree murder would apply. And then that's when you really gotta figure out, what happened, what factually occurred, and whether or not this is, a manslaughter situation. So you really gotta, no, the number one thing, if when I'm representing anybody in these cases, is boots on the ground. You got to be there. You cannot allow law enforcement, whether it's in the Bahamas or in the United States or anywhere, to conduct your investigation as a defense attorney. You got to get there. You got to do your own investigation, because time and time again, in the murder cases that I've handled, my team finds stuff that in every case that the government didn't find. So you got to go in there. You got to investigate your case yourself. And then you can start formulating your defenses based on what your investigators are coming back with, and what it is that you find as the attorney.
No, it's always a fascinating part of how these cases play out. Obviously, we're talking about a very sad situation here. Paige Bell was just 20 years old and had her entire life ahead of her. And we'll see how the court case plays out. Mauricio Padilla, criminal defense attorney. Always great to have you on Law&Crime. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, man.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.